The President of the United States.
We may be a nation divided on policies. We are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil, and replace Obamacare with reforms that expand choice, increase access, lower costs, and at the same time provide better health care. My economic team is developing historic tax reform that will reduce the tax rate on our companies so they can compete and thrive anywhere and with anyone. Making it easier for companies to do business in the United States and much, much harder for companies to leave our country. We will soon begin the construction of a great, great wall along our southern border.
A speech devoid of substance, says an editorial in Washington Post. This should have been his inauguration speech, says another editorial. The most shocking part is that there was nothing shocking, says The Guardian. A softer and slightly more presidential Donald Trump has delivered his first speech before the U.S. Congress. That, in a sense, sums up the reaction that we've seen in the foreign press to Donald Trump's first address to the U.S. Congress. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on this special broadcast. I'm Shireen Bhan, and over the next 30 minutes, we bring you the key highlights from President Trump's address, and we also do a fact check. We will also speak with India's former ambassador to the United States, Meera Shankar, on what President Trump's address means for countries like India. But first up, here are the top 5 highlights of President Trump's speech. Number 1, Trump began his address with the promise he vowed a new chapter in American greatness. Now, this is consistent with his campaign theme of making America great again. At number 2, Trump reiterated his promise to bring millions of jobs back to the United States. He also took credit for various companies like Ford, General Motors, promising to build new plants in the U.S. At number 3, on immigration, President Trump promised to overhaul the current legal immigration system. He quoted the examples of countries like Australia and advocated for a merit-based immigration system. At number 4, the president reiterated another one of his campaign promises, that free trade must be fair trade. He also pointed out to the $800 billion U.S. trade deficit that we saw last year and promised to bridge that. The president did get a lot of flack, though, for not speaking out against the killing of an Indian techie in Kansas. He addressed that issue and said that the U.S. condemns hate and evil in all its forms. Well, earlier today, I spoke with the former Indian ambassador to the U.S., Meera Shankar. I started by asking her about what she made of President Trump's promise of a new chapter in American greatness and what the big highlight for her was from the inaugural address.
Well, firstly, his expression of, some concern over the attacks on Jews or Jewish institutions and the shooting in Kansas, I think was a good starting point, given that an atmosphere has been created in which, foreigners or immigrants are being increasingly seen, from the point of view of some kind of xenophobia. So I think that was good. Subsequently, however, he again reiterated some of his recurring themes on immigration. And while it's good to, for America to look at how to safeguard its security and also protect against illegal immigration, I think when you put it in the context of, setting up a special unit for victims of immigrant crime, you reinforce the stereotype that immigrants equals drugs, equals murder, equals violent crime, and that plays out as in Kansas. It's not, maybe the act of a deranged individual or an individual with serious problems, and it may be sporadic, but there's an atmosphere in which it takes place. And I think it was good that President Trump began with his statement against, hate. But then, as I said, in practical terms, he also talked again of immigration. Now, he did talk of lowering taxes and, for the middle class, so that middle class America, can pursue its dreams. But he didn't talk of financial deregulation or liberalization, of which there has been some speculation, that some of the very onerous provisions of the financial regulations which were put in place after the financial crisis might be eased. But that he didn't speak of in his address. He did talk of reforming health care and replacing Obamacare. And here the interesting thing is that he did keep the provision for providing that there must be insurance for pre-existing conditions, that insurance companies cannot use pre-existing conditions to deny anyone insurance. And this was one clause or provision which President Obama had been very keen on retaining, given that his own mother, had had problems because of a pre-existing condition in getting adequate medical insurance or attention.
Well, those were the big highlights, Meera Shankar. I'll come back to you in just a second, but let's quickly do a fact check on some of the key statements made by President Trump in that address. Here's what he had to say about the labor force in the United States. Take a listen.
94 million Americans are out of the labor force.
Now, this claim by President Trump that 94 million U.S. workers are out of jobs is not true. The official 94 million figure includes anyone over 16 years, retired people, high school and college students, and also people with disabilities, among others. So that is an exaggerated claim. Now to the second statement from President Trump. During the campaign, he had promised major corporate tax cuts. Here's what he had to say about the historic tax reform that he's promising.
Right now, American companies are taxed at one of the highest rates anywhere in the world.
Okay, that's the claim, but here's the fact. American companies are not the most taxed in the world. In fact, according to the OECD, the US is ranked 17th in corporate tax revenue as a percentage of GDP. However, KPMG says United States is not the most tax-friendly country. But even then, it ranks the United States at number 8. The survey ranks India at the top most unfriendly tax nations in the world. Well, that's not good news for us. And finally, here's what President Trump had to say about his most crucial promise of bringing millions of jobs back to the United States.
Since my election, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, General Motors, Sprint, SoftBank, Lockheed, Intel, Walmart, and many others have announced that they will invest billions and billions of dollars in the United States and will create tens of thousands of new American jobs.
Well, this claim is only partially true. Walmart and Ford announced their new projects in the United States much before the elections had even started. Ford also announced its Michigan project before the elections, but the credit, of course, being taken there by the president. That's all right. Now, let's get back to the former ambassador to the U.S., Meera Shankar. She highlighted several issues when we just started our conversation with her. Meera Shankar, let me ask you about what President Trump had to say specifically on immigration. A large part of his speech today was devoted to that issue. Some in substance, protecting our workers means reforming our system of legal immigration is what the president had to say. He's also now talking about moving to what he says is a merit-based immigration system to ensure what he claims is that America moves away from low-skilled and low-wage immigration. How do you see that impacting countries like India?
Well, most of our workers who go on H-1B are not really low-end workers. If you take a look, many of them are paid an average wage of $70,000 to $80,000 per year, which wouldn't be considered low wage, even in America. It would be somewhere in the middle. But there is talk that the H-1B program might be revised to provide that minimum wage is increased. At the moment, it's $60,000 a year, and there are three draft bills in the House of Representatives and the Senate, one seeking to raise it to $100,000, the second seeking to raise the minimum wage for H-1B to $130,000, which would be really very high and almost more than double the existing minimum wage. So we have to see how this plays out. But our companies have been making the point that they are not really competing with American jobs, because their work actually helps American companies be more competitive globally and thereby retain jobs in America and create jobs because of innovation in America. A large number of American companies, not just Indian companies, but a large number of American companies also have H-1B employees, particularly the high-tech companies, and they are very keen to retain this talent pool because it's their ability to attract talent, in a sense, which has given America that big cutting edge in frontier technologies and innovation. So if America were really to staunch, seek to absolutely choke immigration, then I think that they would really be denying themselves something which has helped them to be right there at the front of all change.
Well, Meera Shankar, it is time for us to take a break, but when we return, there's more from President Trump as well as the former ambassador to the US, Meera Shankar.